Hello, Diverse's audience. My name is Matthias, as you might already know, with Diverses. Now, you're used to turning on Diverses, whether you're at home, while you're at work, while you're driving, but don't have the screen in front of your face while you're driving. That's dangerous, Dan. But typically we kind of log on here and we talk poetry, we talk poetry business, we talk ways for poets and artists to be able to grow and evolve themselves, both in their careers and their craft. But today, as you know, it's quite an important day for this nation. It's an important day for this nation, for its people, and for you as poets. And I'm going to talk directly to you without my glasses.
I don't need to see.
These are important times. And these are times that will shape us, that will unite us, and will bring us together. And the only question that I have, it's not who you voted for. It's not why you voted. And it's simply this. What's the deal with poetry systems, guys? Hey, my name is Matthias.
I'm Jeff. What's up,
What's
guys?
going on?
We're talking about poetry
We're
systems
talking about
today.
poetry systems.
So in case you're just joining us again, this is Diverse Live. We're here on Tuesdays talking
We are
all
here.
things poetry, craft, business, writing related. And so, speaking of the business side, so I was reading and listening to a talk by a marketer I mentioned a lot by the name of Seth Godin. And he recently just released a book. Actually, yeah, I have not had a chance to read the book yet. It literally just came out. It's called This Is Strategy. And one of the things that he talks a little bit about in the book is the concept of systems. And on a recent blog post of his, I thought was really interesting. I'll just read it for you guys really quick. So this says, important change is systems change. Willpower is overrated. If you want to eat healthier, don't work hard to avoid stopping at the cookie jar when you walk into the kitchen. Get rid of the cookie jar. Systems are long-lasting, widespread, and resilient. We can push back on them with effort, but over time, the system usually comes out ahead. Once we see a system, we can change it. Fixing the metrics and rewards of public education is more productive than celebrating one teacher who managed to outmaneuver the existing paradigm. And banning gas leaf blowers makes a lot more sense than shaming one landscaper for using them. Today, I want to talk a little bit about that aspect of noticing, so that way we can actually start to understand what are the systems that are in place in poetry, and then leave it up to you to decide what you want to do with that knowledge. I think one of the things that we do when we're not frozen, one second, there we go. I think one of the things that we do at the Verses is we haven't, I don't think, stated it this way, but I think we're about that idea of system and change and trying to have poetry take on like new frontiers and new approaches with people.
Yeah.
So when I read that and when I heard it, like it was something that really resonated with me. But again, I think it starts with the concept of noticing. So from a language learning perspective, I just want to kind of talk about noticing really quick. Noticing is this idea that if you don't notice something, it's really hard to learn it because you don't even know it's there. You're like you have no idea it's even there. So like for instance, if I'm an English teacher, if I'm teaching a student to like say the sentence like the dog chased the ball. And if I have a beginner level student, I say, hey, what did I just say? They might be able to tell me like, oh, dog, ball. But something they're missing, they might miss all the thes, like the dog chased the ball. They don't even hear it. They don't even know it's there. But if instead I give them a sentence and I tell them it and like I put in blanks, like if I write blank dog chased blank ball, now suddenly when I say the sentence, they're listening. But oh, what's there? Something's there. I don't know.
Yeah.
So just that aspect is noticing.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is really important, like even when it comes to like kind of noticing things that you that you maybe are like either missing in routine or like missing just because it's routine, is also being able to acknowledge things and systems that like you're kind of almost taking for granted.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna make this like religious, but there was actually something like really interesting
That God said.
that God actually told me yesterday about you guys. But no, it was funny. It was, it kind of ran into it randomly on Facebook, as a matter of fact. But like there is this, there was like they were at this church, and this pastor brought somebody up on stage, and the guy that he brought up was this really big bodybuilder guy that was a member of the church. And he's this really big bodybuilder guy, and he was just like, "Would you know?" And the pastor's and like I think his name was like Ronald or something like that. He was just like, me and Ron, we go to the same gym, and and everybody laughed because like the pastor was not a super fit guy whatsoever, but like this guy, he really was. And he was just like the differences, and we've been going to the same gym for a relatively the same amount of time, but the differences in our results are from our mindset. Because he's like, when I go to the gym, like I go to the gym, and so later on, when you have like the cookie or something like that, he's like, I can have a cookie, I can do this, I can do that. But he was just like, when Ron goes to the gym, he says, I went to the gym to say, that's the reason why I don't want to ruin the results that I have by doing this, by doing that. And these are things that I'm like, if you are like, just when it comes to like creating systems or having systems that make sense for you and for your goals, being able to be like, okay, well, because I'm working hard at this goal, I'm working forward motion towards this goal. It's the reason why I can't have these things that are impediments to my goal. So, yeah.
So I think, and just to maybe give some even more examples of systems, just to make sure we're really all on the same page. The example that Seth gave that I was telling the class about earlier is like, for instance, if you think of weddings, I mean, there's all the things like so many things fall into systems, but one system in a wedding is if you think about bridesmaids and how, if you've never been to a wedding before, you know nothing about weddings, and then you suddenly go to a wedding and you're like, why are all these women wearing, similar style dresses next to the bride? And, a lot of times, like, the bridesmaid dresses may or may not necessarily be the first choice of the bridesmaids themselves, So it's like, why are they wearing these outfits that they maybe aren't their first choice? And then you find out, oh, well, a wedding system is that the bridesmaid dictates what the bride dictates what the bridesmaids wear. And so then even like once you're aware of that system, then when like you have your own wedding, the bride can talk to the bridesmaids and be like, oh, we're not doing it this year. You know what I mean? So like we can break the system too. Be like, oh, I want you all to wear the same color, but you can choose whatever you want, or like things like that, Yeah. But it still is operating under the paradigm of the system.
Yeah.
But you adjust it,
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do again is I want us to just kind of start becoming aware. What are systems that exist in poetry? Because I think a lot of times when we're talking about systems, we're talking about things that have been in place for a very long time that aren't even questioned.
Yeah, it's like a really good system is a system you probably don't even feel like it's kind of embedded.
Yeah.
At the point that you're recognizing it, you've probably already adhered to it about a dozen times, if not more.
So I think I'm just going to kind of start with systems that I've noticed with poetry that I think the verses is purposely trying to subvert is funding. Like funding, I think in the arts, in poetry, is predominantly the systems in place generally fall under philanthropy, nonprofit grants, and fellowships and residencies. There's this idea of application. Like you have to apply for something and then get accepted under a review process. That is a system.
Yeah, and I think it's a system because it's a system of I think kind of like activity that puts you into other systems, right? So it's like it's you as an artist feeling like the natural progression for me as an artist is to start just applying for other things. But I also think it's a system to not do things for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like I mean, and I know that you had like another point on top of that, but I think like one of the other systems that like I see that you see a lot is like kind of like a pulling back of like, hey, why don't you just kind of create a brand and like market yourself as a poet, as opposed to like pushing yourself into these organizations or like or grants or anything like that. Which is, I want to be clear. So it's not even that you can't do those things, but it's that, well, like people have their own kind of way, but it's like as well as also again, people aren't willing to be just put themselves out there and say like, my work is good, my work has an audience, I'm going to reach my audience myself. And we talk about it a lot when it comes to like when you see somebody at like an open mic or like and they're talking about like, hey, I submitted 1,000 times here or 1,000 times here, but I'm like, okay, that's great. Have you ever had headshots before? Oh, never? Okay, fair enough. Have you ever looked into like what publishing your work might look like? No. Do you have like a web? No, I don't want to get into that.
But I mean,
but yeah, it's just to say like there's like so many things that are like very simple things that if you just started doing them for yourselves, then like other things might happen for you, but also like you can make things happen for yourself, and it's kind of like again a system in that you are not doing those things for yourself.
It's interesting you bring up headshot. I mean, there's a system to headshots, right?
Yeah.
What's the poet headshot system?
You take your phone and
so let's I think like beginner there's levels to this, right? So I think like beginner level is like click, like ceiling fan, unmade bed, like so I think there's that level. I think let's imagine like I think even like though to like professional author photo headshot. What's the system for that?
Like what kind of shot is it?
Yeah. In my opinion, yeah.
One of these, and then
or like the
you're taking it back. This with the little patch,
the site leaning against the wall. There's the outdoor one. We'll get a little tree branch
maybe
behind
leaning
you,
against the wall,
effect, a little blurry in the background.
Yeah.
No smile. It's not usually like you don't see like the full face. No, you see the. It's very very deadpan, very serious. Black and white, very common.
Yeah, good monochrome.
So with that in mind, like if we want to subvert that, so what's the opposite of that? I'm thinking like animated, cartoony.
That could be good. I even think about claymation.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay. One of the genres that I'm doing some research into right now for like some filmmaking. It's incredibly time consuming.
Are you doing stop motion stuff? Oh my gosh.
I'm
so sorry.
I'm delving into it. I'm working on some things. But yeah, but that could be cool because you can have your claymation, or you can have your figure do like 1,000 different little things. Yeah. You can have them sitting at a desk. You could have them, reading your book. You know what I mean? You could have like you can make a little scene where your claymation or your figure is doing like just all kinds of really cool things that I feel like. I mean, again, now I want to be clear, depending on what you're.
But even like you have like a GIF, like a little like 3-second looping thing.
Does Twitter allow you to do that? I wonder. Or X? Probably not.
I imagine if you can get the file size small enough. The problem with GIFs is the file size just blows up so fast.
But so I don't think it allows you. I don't think it allows you to do it as your thing anymore.
Which also is a system. just
hack X.
Just say it. But like in one of the things that again Seth mentions is that I think when you start challenging systems like when you're you know when you're really onto something when the system pushes back. When the
Yeah,
system, because there's going to be resistance,
for sure.
because it's its own kind of self-preservation. If you remove the system's not going to want to be removed, right?
And there's also, it's kind of a like not only the system is going to be agitated, but I think people that adhere to the system will also be agitated
100%.
because they are people that are reliant on the system. And
Yeah.
so if you are like, well, I'm not gonna, I think, and I don't want to say it's necessarily jealousy because it's not necessarily that, but sometimes it is. But I think a lot of times people can see the like they could see somebody going in, like, that started off on the same trajectory, but then decided, I'm gonna actually do this. I'm gonna create my own thing.
And
But
what
then
if they're right?
what?
What if?
Hey,
I don't think they are, but there's that little seed of doubt now. It's
That's,
like, I
and
don't
that's the
know.
thing.
It's like,
Was like because then you have like the sunk cost fallacy, right? So now you're watching somebody who says, "Well, I'm not going to publish with any of these people. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to publish my own work. I'm going to bring my work directly to my audience, and I'm going to try to grow organically like that, as opposed to some institution saying, "Hey, this person's work is great," and they might look at and again, it depends on what you value, right? Because I know, like, you can do something like that, and then you can create a viewership of your work that is incredibly vast, and but has none of the, again, like, the system notoriety
you don't
that
have the
these other people
credentials,
have.
right? The
So like
traditional.
now they're looking at you and they're like, well, so what if you're if our front man, if our headliner has sold, 20,000 less copies than you do on a bad week, you know what I mean? Like, our
Yeah.
first week, like, I had like a kind of a okay week, but it's like, but I'm getting directly to my viewership, I'm getting directly to the people that read me, and I'm growing kind of organically. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like, people, like, the system is gonna buck against you, like, exactly like you said, but it's also like people that are reliant on the system. It's kind of like the Matrix, but I can't talk about the Matrix anymore on the podcast because it'll be a Matrix podcast. But it's like
This is
exactly
very
like the
easy.
Matrix.
Yeah. I mean, that's the. And I think one of the things that, again, Seth mentions a lot is that there we have to put ourselves in positions to be wrong, because it might not work.
Yeah,
It might be that I go rogue and I try to just create my own platform, and it fails. It doesn't get the traction. But that's the risk. Like, I think meaningful change is change that risks not being possible.
yeah,
Because if you're just doing something that's just minutely different, that's probably not going to cause significant change. We have to be willing to be wrong, and that's scary because you're investing real resources
yeah,
into it.
yeah. It's like, anything that's like really worth it is gonna take probably an escalated version of the risk that you currently are undertaking, right? So it's like, be, if you are willing to put your money and time behind yourself and into yourself, and I'm saying, like, into yourself, as opposed to a ton of submissions and a ton of, like, events for these organizations. Like, I can't. There was a poet actually fairly recently in Columbus that she booked her own feature, and I thought about it, and, like, I remember Scott talked about it online, and or he talked about it on Facebook, and I thought about that, and I'm thinking, like, booking your own feature feels like exactly what you should be doing. You know what I mean? Like
But no one does it.
no, because everybody's waiting for the show. Everybody's waiting for,
You need to be invited.
you need to. But I'm just like, man, wait, hold on. If you believed in, if you in again, I would say, like, kind of organize things around it. So, like, kind of look at, if I'm gonna book my own feature, then I'm gonna also have merch. I'm like something to bolster, like, me. There's gonna be a door cost and all that other stuff. And I just think about that as an example of, kind of what is possible as an artist. And we talk about it all the time. Like, there's things that you see larger artists doing that you think they're doing because they're large artists. And I'm like, no, they're doing that because they're artists and they get large because that is how they do things. Like, like I was actually, it's actually so funny. So there's a gallery owner, 83 Gallery here in Columbus. The owner and operator, his name is Jeff. And me and him were talking about, like, they're not this Jeff. There's another. Actually, but y'all spell your names the same way, which is hilarious. But me and him were talking about it, and I was just like, there's like people that submit things to the gallery, but they have an entire infrastructure with how they create, when they create, who they're creating for, what, like, they have a system of like the galleries that they're submitting things to, but they have their own website, and they also do their own like there's like this girl that did her own gallery opening where she rented out a space that wasn't necessarily like a gallery, but it was like an event space.
I'll talk about a whole other system.
But that's another system. But it's just to say that, like, she saw an opportunity to be able to display her work and to be able to sell her work, and she almost like sold out of her work during that thing. And if you know anything about how much a painting can cost, then like as soon as she sold one painting, that paid for the event. You know what I mean? But she almost sold out, so it was a lot. So it's just to say that there are ways that you can take a look at what the current system is, and being able to be like, well, if I bet on myself, I can win at a much higher margin.
It's like, let's talk about like venues, like systems for venues. So, like, where do poetry shows have to occur?
Oh, they have to occur in a room. It has to have a bar, and it has to have a DJ for some reason. And I'm not discrediting events that have DJs, but I just want to point out to everybody, having a DJ is not necessarily like a poetry show and a DJ are not like joined at the hip. Okay, there can be a specific kind of poetry show that you get a DJ for, and those are a ton of fun. But I think a lot of times I'm talking to people that are trying to put together a poetry show, and they're like, man, and I just gotta get a DJ. I'm just like, that's the why is that the second thing?
That's also like,
you and a DJ.
I would, again, not to knock it, but DJs are expensive, and that's money. If I'm hiring performers, I'd rather throw that at my performers. Personally,
yeah. I think if I'm having a hard time putting things together, I'm not gonna be like, okay, I gotta really figure out you know what I'm saying?
There's a list of priorities.
I don't want to be clear. Shout out to all the amazing DJs. Like, I want to be clear. I'm just talking about for poetry events, and it's because, like, a DJ is a really good asset and a really good person and a really incredible artist and technician for most spaces. And I think if you can have one, I don't think that there's a reason why you necessarily shouldn't. Good music,
no, for sure.
But I'm saying that if some people are like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this event unless I have this DJ creating the vibes, because you're not even always creating the vibe with that. So yeah,
I think other systems that you see in place, like if you go to open mic, like even just like real basic stuff, like the more you see it, like there's so many, like seating, everyone faces the stage, microphone in the center, there is a microphone, there's a PA system. Like, what if the poetry reading was headsets? Like, I'm going to speak to a microphone, everyone's going to have like headphones on, and then you're going to hear me through those. Like, I'm not saying do that, but like thinking about like,
they do that with
once you
like karaoke.
Yeah, they do like there's cool. I forget the name of it, like just one like the forest or something like that, and basically like it's just you don't hear anything, but then you turn on your headphones, like everyone's just like jamming the music and like headset in like the middle of the woods, like and stuff like that. Like even just like imagine that you went to like an open mic and everyone's facing away from the stage. You know what I mean? Or like again, like just think about all the different sort of expectations in place. Even in terms of going to a poetry show, you pay. You pay at the entry. You don't pay to leave. You pay to get in.
Or you say you should pay that?
I'm not saying. Again, the goal.
All right, good night, guys. Cough it up. I just want to go home to my family. Not tonight, you don't.
But I mean, what if it was handled more like, for instance, like contracts and like for like athletes and things like that? You know, you had a breakout year. Okay, fine. Your next deal, this is what you get. And you know what I mean? Like, it's. I'm not saying do these things, but I'm saying let's recognize what's in place, because once we recognize what's in place, we can then start questioning what's in place.
Yeah.
We could be like, why is this in place? And maybe it's in place for a really good reason, and like we want to keep it that way. But
Yeah.
maybe this is also opportunities for disruption.
Yeah, I think one of the other, I'm always a fan of deconstruction after like introspection, right? So you have to really kind of understand, you know, tearing something down is only makes sense if it was like, if it should have been torn down. Sometimes like the thing that you have in place is like the most viable potential.
I mean,
that there
like
is,
for instance, like washing hands is a great institution. Like that's a system
Not
we
in my
need.
home. Not where I'm from.
You know,
America.
like, but I think just really starting to see what's in place. Like other, so there's just some examples of like from like poetry shows, you know, even in terms of like the audience, like audience expectations at a poetry show.
Like seating, or
I mean, it could be seating. It's going to be in terms of, oh, after a poem is performed, you clap, you know, or applaud, you know, versus, and that's something you can see across the, like some poetry shows you go, you don't, you know, there's no applause until the end. Some poetry shows, like, you know, if you're doing like slams and things like that, what's a system in slam that's not necessarily in like a more like academic sort of reading, you know, in a slam, like the audience participation aspect is a real set kind of expectation, you know, versus, you know, other readings, you're kind of expected to kind of just be like hush hush quiet until, you know, the person's done reading, you know. So things like that.
like I had this idea, and I was thinking about it back when we were doing like seventh draft, but like I never really got it off because we were just too busy doing other things at the time. But like an open mic where like first of all, there's no signing up for the open mic after the mic, like after it starts. It's like you have to have already signed up. But then you have the entire open mic list. So let's say you have 15 people. That means take 15 envelopes and write all 15 names of the people that are in the open mic. And so whenever somebody goes up to the open mic, they have an envelope, and after that person reads, then that person has to introduce your next the next artist. Now, my entire proposition behind that was it would create some randomness to who's going up next, but then also I think there's a lot of hosts that filibuster, so they're just like up there and they're just talking and having a great time. And the thing is, hosts are great. Like I'm a host. I like to host, but I think that like if you took that mechanism out of it and you were like, you know, the people introduce the next person, but it's also random. So it's like, it's not like they get to choose who's next. It's like they have a random envelope, and then that person on the random envelope, they're going to come up next. Like, I think that to me seems like a good system.
It's hard with even just talking like starting up a poetry show, especially one that's doing things unconventionally, is really tricky.
Yeah.
Because people have an expectation based on what we talk about, what a poetry show looks like and behaves, you know?
Yeah.
I think switching over to a writing aspect, you know, forms like poetry forms like sonnets, haiku, you know, villanelles, like these are systems, you know, they're telling you need to, you know, have this certain, even poetry meter is a system. Like there's guidelines for that, you know. If you're doing like submissions for like, you know, even just having like tiers of journals, you know, their journals are considered like
even
tier
just
1.
having tiers.
Even just having tiers and like. Yes. you know, like the expectations that they have.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, oh, you're trying to submit to this one journal. Well, that means, oh, well, you need to have a turn. There needs to be high stakes. That turn that you wrote needs to be in a certain spot. You can't have it occur too soon, but it also can't occur too late. There's things that you need to do with the characters. There's expectations in terms of the images that you're using. There's, you know, even this the idea of like cliche and avoiding cliche. Like these are again all sorts of expectations we apply to what we want the writing
Yeah.
to have. You know.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like I mean, even with stuff like that, it's like honestly, I think a lot of times people that are breaking systems, it's like there's a trade off between like bravery and like efficacy. So you can't expect that you're great because you're brave. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people, they expect because I'm doing something different, that means my work is good. And everybody that's not doing my different thing is bad. But a lot of times you are the first person to do something and it is bad, but you are the person that turns so that when other people are down that road, somebody that's really great at that can like really excel. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that anybody out there is bad or whatever like that. It's just to say that like I think kind of having the expectation of taking a writing dynamic or language dynamic and changing it doesn't always mean that you're about to be like a great. You can be a revolutionary and just still not be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shout out to George Washington. Great. Solid guy.
Yes. My favorite Washington quote is, "Don't start nothing, won't be nothing."
There actually won't in fact be anything.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
Big G.
Yeah. So I think from just like our perspective, what's kind of this is something we touched on earlier, but I think the big thing for us is just trying to help poets understand that if you don't want to do the MFA academia route and you believe that poetry is something that can sustain you financially and creatively, because what's the expectation for poet? You tell someone that you know you're a poet and everyone's like, oh, well, what's your job, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, well, what do you do for a living, you know? And that's even among poets. Like it's so ingrained that you know that's even kind of the expectation among people in the craft itself. Even though there's musicians out there making livings off of music, there's artists out there that are full-time artists. You know, people can be. You tell someone you're a photographer, and people are like, oh, so that's your business, like that. That doesn't like bat an eyebrow. Like if someone says like, hey, no, I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're always doing projects that, you know, are the art that you want necessarily, but you're still involved in it to some degree.
Yeah.
Poets can do that too.
For sure. And I think it has to do with like the perception of the market as well, because I think something like music is something that somebody they go to their car, and when they go to their car, they pop in a song, or like they turn on the radio, or like a lot more likely they're hooking their phone into the like aux, and then they're listening, or they're listening to it on their MP3, or that was a very old term. Everybody used to just be MP3s used to be separate from your phone, so your music didn't used to be in there, but now it's in there. So don't worry. Don't.
We ain't going back.
We're not going back. We're not going back.
We ain't going.
But it's just to say that like that system even is something that you like. I would say like, what if there was like marketing around just the concept of, yo, we're going on a road trip. Let's listen to this poetry album. Like we're hopping in the car, head to the store real quick. Ooh, let me check out what there's like a maybe like a poetry. I know there are these things exist, but just kind of getting them more out there. Like poetry Spotify's, where it's like as opposed to tap it in with some music. Maybe you're listening to a Spotify channel that just has, poems, and you're like, oh, that's a really good poem. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, just changing some dynamics. And so a lot of these things are like just really strong systems that you can kind of help engineer or change some of the dynamics around them.
It's interesting you brought up the Spotify. So one of the things we're working on right now.
Oh yeah.
So a project I'm working on. If you're a Columbus-based poet, where I'm creating the Columbus Poet playlist, which is going to be a YouTube video, also potentially MP3. So it's just basically, if you're a Columbus-based poet, sending me a recording of yourself reading a poem that's 2-3 minutes in length, compiling them, put them together into a single source. So then what I can do is I can go to, my real goal is to go to like businesses and things like that and say, hey, we have this playlist or this audio track for your business if you so choose to play it during the day or something like that. You know what I mean? So then the business can support local artists, but then they also have something to play and things like that, if they so choose,
Yeah.
But it's also just something that, like, if you're just a Columbus poet and you're just trying to get an idea of who's in the city, like, then you could be like, oh, well, I want to just hear different people's voices and things like that, as a way to kind of just get familiar with the scene,
Yeah. It could be cool because I know they do like track, like you can do like maybe that might be a little bit difficult, but kind of the same way they do like maps, like you when you drive you go into a different area, and it's kind of like that way when you look up what you want to eat, it's like it's not pulling up what you want to eat in Columbus, it's pulling up what you want to eat in Omaha or wherever you're going, right? Like it would be cool to have like a channel or like a streaming service that like you go, if I'm going to New Orleans, it's gonna pull up the art and culture that's from there. So now I'm gonna be able to listen to artists from there, and that's gonna include like poems and like poetry, and poets that are from that area, music and stuff like that from that area that way. And I know they have like kind of localized like radio stations and stuff like that, but I'm saying like specifically like it's like something that I can be listening to that while I'm in Columbus is giving me this, but then like, and maybe you can manually change it sometimes. Man, this might be an idea that I don't know.
This is turning to a endeavor,
but like you can
like
manually change it. But it's like it's also something that's tied to your geo, like your tracker on your phone. So like you can also be like, oh, I drove into Cleveland, Ohio, and Cleveland they have all these really dope artists that have their music and their poems and stuff like that up here.
Yeah. I mean, even on a more micro scale, like even if we had it in, like long term, if we had it split up by neighborhoods, like for instance, if you drive through Hilltop, you get local artists from there. If you go over to Linden, then you get local poets from there. If you're downtown, you get, so it's like,
shout out to Hilltop.
Yeah, we out here, man. West Side. So kind of speaking to that, I want to. We gave lots and lots and lots of examples of systems. So I think also talking about some potential like next steps, I think will be helpful too. And we've also kind of thrown out some ideas in that regard too, but I think something more focused. So, like one of the examples we talked about, again, like if you're, that's Seth mentioned, if you're trying to lose weight, maybe the system isn't like trying to not open the cookie jar until like, after dinner. Maybe the actual system is just removing this cookie jar entirely.
Or putting carrots in the cookie jar.
Yeah. Or like some, yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, that's something for those of you who have kids. I mean, that's pretty much part of the strategy with childcare. Is like, instead of just like, leaving stuff out and then punishing your kids when they don't do something you want, what if you just like removing the distractions or the thing that, oh my gosh, I know that they're going to want this later. So let's just not even have to deal with it. Let's just get rid of it, For instance, a quick example of that, like in our bathroom, like we keep leaving like food wrappers and stuff like that. And it's a trash can that doesn't have a lid on it. So it's like, let's not leave food wrappers in the trash can that doesn't have a lid on it because, things happen. So it's like, well, probably the easiest solution is to, one, either just replace that trash can with something that has a lid, or the easier option would just be, let's just get rid of the trash can. You know what I mean? Like, instead it's like, the other option too would just be leave the situation as is, and then just like talk to them every day about you threw something in there again. Why do we let's not, the one that's probably going to resolve the most headache would be to just get rid of it. You know? So if let's focus on the idea that the system we're trying to challenge is trying to inform poets that, hey, there is an alternative. There's ways to incorporate poetry into something that also sustains you financially. You know, what are new systems that we could put in place? Like the new system, again, you gave the example of, instead of having cookies out, you have carrots out. Instead of, you know, having the open trash can, you put in a closed trash can. Like, what are some systems that you think potentially could help put people into that mindset? Oh, I can take this seriously in a professional way. Not to put you on the spot with like immediate answers.
No, no, no. So I think right now, one of the things I think about is open mics kind of being spaces that are more or less free of like criticism and critique of your work, and like, or like of like there are places like it's not necessarily expected. You just want to kind of express yourselves. And I think there's like a space like that that's like beneficial about open mics. But I think one of a cool thing about like that might be a space where, as opposed to like that, you might have like an open mic where it's a really defined list. Like, it's not like everybody can just go up there. But then, like, maybe one half of the open mic is everybody that performs, and the other half of the open mic is people talking about each other's work and maybe, like, giving, like, some kind of formalized, like, this is what I found in the work, this is what I thought, this is, and things like that. Because I think that's, there isn't, I think most of the critiquing space kind of comes from, like, workshops that are both, like, inconsistent. Like, they're typically really kind of inconsistent, and they're coming from like one singular person out to those, like, to the artist, you know what I mean? Or like a group of like artists, and then they're giving out to everybody else. But I think the same system that we kind of use in slam to a degree, whereas like the maybe a lot of slams just like 5 random people from the audience, and they're the ones who are talking about it. But like having a show where it's like random people that you might not know, that you don't have any kind of context for, but these are the people that are like, they're kind of giving like, this is what I found in the work, this, I thought it was clear, I thought this, and then I think that is something that maybe it's like just an added system, but it's something that you're taking it away from, I think, these like spaces that you have to apply for, and you have to like kind of hopefully can kind of get into this space in order to kind of get like really close critiques or anything like that. You kind of take that and you open it up to what you would a show, and now everybody can kind of have those kind of critiques and talk about people's work. I think I was actually just talking to somebody a little bit earlier, another artist, and we just talked about like there's not enough spaces where artists are able to really work on craft together in community. Like, everybody's kind of working on craft separately and apart from each other, and then they're coming to shows and just displaying, and then they're going right back to maybe work on it if they do. But yeah, something like that might engineer a space where you can actually you have your fellow artists that are there to kind of do that, but then you might also have just like audience members that are like, hey, I got some feedback.
I think a key thing is trying to figure out what is a service or offer that you can create around poetry for other people. And I think that can take a lot of different arms. Like, it can be a book, it can be like a mixtape, it can be something like that. But it could also be something like,
you got a mixtape on the way?
I do not my own. At least not right now. But like, what if it was something like, because you might be like, but I don't really have, maybe I don't have my own audience or something like that. Do you know another poet who does? What if you collaborate on something? What if you were kind of the setup person? Like, what if you're like, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a reading series where I bring in the poet. I pay them a certain fee. And then to compensate for that, I charge the door and things like that. It's like when I already know what their fee is, then I can handle all the rest. So I know what all my expenses are and things like that.
Yeah.
So something like that. So it's like you don't. It's still poetry related because you're bringing in a poet, but now you're kind of you become the event organizer. So like something like that. It could be something. Another example would be, maybe you get involved in trying to help company like small businesses with their ads. Like maybe you're like, I'm going to help them with their social media posts by incorporating some poetry with it
Yeah.
or something like that. You know, um, it can be, looking for different opportunities and collaborations. I mean, the big thing is pain points. Whenever you're trying to create a service or an offering, you need to understand what's the problem that someone or a company is having, and then how can I incorporate poetry into part of the solution.
Yeah.
you know but I think that these are the sorts of concepts that we need to kind of have in mind, because if we're just going to traditional thing, it's like, well, I need to get published or I need to get a teaching job. We're again falling back into the systems.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if the more we can think of ways to get out of that, the more I think there could be a lot more opportunities.
Yeah. Now, you know what? I think that one of the things that's like really appealing about that idea is that all the systems, most of the systems that you had in place are probably not the first incarnation of what, is possible in that space. Like even Poetry Slam was kind of an effort to bring poetry from just like this scholarly place and like bring it down to like, everyday people. And I think that over time it's become a system that, has really great benefits, but there's also like some pitfalls to it, which is kind of like, if you operate, what is the Batman quote? You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So it's like, if a system is around long enough, you can see like the cracks and you can see things happening with it, which is again the perfect space for innovation
Yeah.
and for maybe a new system, something else that could come along. And eventually there'll probably be an issue with that, but you created something new that maybe has some staying power. So yeah.
Some things that I've done. So I've again, I mentioned earlier, I'm a teacher. One of the things I'm actively doing is incorporating more and more poetry, reading poems, and things like that. Also, a lot of elements of storytelling into the lessons that I teach. Every week we have a class that's dedicated just practice reading a poem out loud and like tying that into pronunciation. So they're reading it loud and they're like, okay, well, we're going to talk about how do we convey certain emotions. What are we doing like pitch wise? What are we doing with our voice? What are we doing with our breath work and things like that? So we're tying in pronunciation to poetry.
Yeah.
I have a video course I created. I made a video course. I had people sign up, and say, hey, like we're going to record this and I'm going to show you how to take a text and read a text out loud in a way that doesn't sound like you're reading. It sounds like an actual conversation. And things like that. It's a video course. We had it. Students came. I recorded it, and now I sell it on my website so people can purchase it again in the future, like indefinitely. It's an asset for me. Also, like over the weekend, I took again some students from my group coaching class, and they said, let's just have a meetup and just talk about. We looked at a section of a craft essay and discussed a poem related to it. These aren't poets. These aren't people who read poetry on their own. These are people who are learning English or interested in like just English in general. And I'm finding ways to connect them over to poetry.
Yeah.
That's
too.
And they pay me to do it.
Yeah, that's and I think that's like a very like kind of I don't know. I was reading like this like quote. There's like a professor, and he was like talking about like the reason why you shouldn't like mandate certain language laws is because like language is a tool. Like it's like I think people kind of look at it weird, but I'm like, language is a tool. Like if something works well as a tool, people are going to keep using it in the same way that like when people first found out about a hammer. It's like, yeah, like this thing works really well to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish this task, and like the design mallet like look, and it evolved over time, and then there's different incarnations of it. And it's the same thing with like any other tool. You had, you had horse and buggy, and then you had like the coal, and like now you have like vehicles. Now you even have like, electric vehicles, and who knows what after that. And so I just think that when you have a tool that works, it's going to like you're going to be able to implement the mechanism
Mm-hmm.
like really well. And so it's again, when we're talking about like poetry, it's like poetry, it can be entertaining, it can give you like, it can give you the feels, you can do a lot of things with it. But then it's like, you're also able to engineer it in a way to help people that are like on their journey learning English, and
Mm-hmm.
on their journey like kind of like pronouncing and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's like, once you figured out, okay, this tool is good for something, like you could there's engineering that you can do to kind of make it more useful
Mm-hmm.
over time.
Mm-hmm. So again, and it's the concept we've talked a lot about, is that a lot of times I think if you're trying to connect poetry with an offer, it's approaching it from a perspective of like poetry, and like what's the link between poetry and the next thing that you want to do. So like
Yeah.
I'm doing it like poetry and English language learning, or specifically targeting pronunciation. It's like
Yeah.
English and I mean poetry and pronunciation. The more that you can kind of tie it with the and break away from just the expectation that it just needs to be poetry based and my target's just going to be poets and things like that, that's very limiting. And also the market's already pretty saturated,
Yeah.
you know whereas if you can find a new area to kind of target, there might be a lot more opportunities there.
For sure.
Any final thoughts with things on just systems, poetry systems?
No, I mean innovation. Innovation is always out there. It's just somebody's gonna innovate. Why not you?
Yeah.
That's the really important thing. Somebody's gonna find out. Oh man, I don't have to do things this way. And once somebody figures that
Mm-hmm.
out, like, do you want to? I mean, I'm not. Again, it typically takes special circumstances for people. I don't know. I wasn't alive at this time, but there was a very long amount of time when people were just eating jelly sandwiches, and they were like, "Jelly is great." Then George Washington Carver was like, "Wait a minute, guys. Why don't we add a little bit of peanut butter onto that?" And everybody called him crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "George, you're insane. You're nutty." They said, and then
That's I'd like to bear before that, but that's yeah. We don't have enough people telling us that we're crazy,
not enough.
and that also one final thing. I know I'm mentioning a lot, but
Wait, you like jelly sandwiches?
no. No.
Why? I don't know why that made me.
One other thing that Seth mentioned, and I think it kind of speaks to, is that the advantage that comes with having a head start. Because some people are like, oh, well, it's a head start, like other companies are going to catch up and things like that. But there are advantages that come with starting sooner. Like if you start learning, the example you give is like if you start learning hockey at like 4 years old and you get really good, and your parents then sign you up for like really good coaches, by the time you're 7, and then you start playing, for like JV teams, even though you're underage and things like that, and then you're on the track, like, and it just like ramps up. But all of this started because you've had the head start,
Yeah.
versus other kids who maybe start when they're 8 or 10. It amplifies and it can snowball, and it can snowball really fast because one advantage can lead to another advantage, which can lead to another one. So it's like, as you find this out, that in a lot of ways we're very fortunate with poetry because a lot of people aren't pushing the bounds of what poetry can do, like they
Yeah.
are with like music, or what they are doing with like other art forms and things like that. It's like poetry really, in my mind, it really is an untapped art
Yeah.
that other industries, like musicians have concert halls, artists, visual artists, they have galleries, you know, the poets right now don't really have the thing yet,
That's true.
and
Well, we don't. I think we don't have like the individual thing. Like we have like you have people that are really really large artists that an institution will have like a book signing or have like a a large event for them to speak and things like that. But musicians, they'll have like a concert hall where
You
it's
have
like
your
them
own concert
representing
hall.
themselves
It's
and they're like doing their thing.
intentionally
Yeah.
designed for music.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Gallery is intentionally designed for hanging art. What does a space that's purely for poetry look like? And then the question is, how do we, once you have the vision, then you can be like, how do we move in that direction?
Yeah.
All right. That's all I got for you guys. If you have more ideas about poetry systems and ways to start subverting them, attacking them, and creating new ones, I'm sure to leave us a note in the comments. Thanks for hanging out with us. Once more, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
Guys, we'll see you all later. Hope you guys have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon. Take care, guys.